So thank you all so much for joining today. We're really excited to have you here, and we just appreciate you all taking time out of your busy schedules to take a step back and really dig into what it means to activate an effective employer branding strategy. There's been a lot of change over the past few years in the marketplace. So it's a really relevant topic today. I think there's a lot of interest and impact that a strong employer brand strategy can have on your organization. So we're going to just get into it today. So thanks for taking the time. Before we dive into our agenda, we have a lot of things to go through today. I wanted to just do a quick introduction of myself and HireClix. My name is Cori Lunnen. I am Director of Client Services here at HireClix. I've been on the team for just about 12 years. I started right out of the gate of college in recruitment marketing. So I was lucky enough to get connected with our founder, Neil Costa, in the early days of HireClix, and have seen a ton of evolution on the agency side of the house, as well as within the talent acquisition and recruitment marketing space over the years. As I said, there's been a ton of change, and I think there's a lot more opportunity now than there really ever has been. I'm based out of our headquarters in Gloucester, Massachusetts, so we're just north of Boston. And when I'm not working, I spend my time with my husband, my two boys, and our two dogs. It's a bit of a circus over at the Lunnen household, but a really fun one. So just a little bit about me. And then HireClix, we're really a recruitment marketing agency that helps HR and TA executives to understand how to activate their brand and advertise their priority jobs and opportunities online, whether it be through job boards or through consumer media channels. When we started in 2010, Neil came from the Monster board back in the day, so worked on the internal marketing team at Monster and really promoted Monster's brand on consumer sites to drive candidates back to Monster to apply to employer jobs. So we've really taken that approach throughout the years to encompass a metrics-driven strategy for our clients and an innovative services-driven approach as we activate their ads across different channels and understand what is really driving the ROI for their recruitment marketing mix. One of our core values at HireClix is when our customers succeed, we succeed. And I think it's a core tenet of how we all operate here. We act as an extension of our clients' team and really trying to tell the story of what is happening with their recruitment marketing investments and the initiatives that they're taking on. Outside of just recruitment advertising, there's a lot that our team can offer. We specialize in a ton of different areas, from building creative assets for employer branding strategies, building career sites, developing EVP strategies, and also optimizing the overall TA function. So understanding what the technology stack is, what the process looks like from candidate engagement on the career site to flowing into the applicant tracking system, and how that all ties back into the overall business objectives. So a little bit about HireClix before we dive in. And today, really the main topic that we're going to be going through is how to activate your employer brand in the marketplace. But before we get into kind of that next stage and expanding what that looks like, we really wanted to take a step back and understand and define what is employer branding, why is it important in today's marketplace, and what are the key foundational areas that make up that overall strategy so that you can effectively activate on that strategy when you go to market. I think the biggest piece of employer branding is related to the candidate, whether it's a potential candidate or an existing employee. Your employer brand is shaped by those who are interacting with your organization, whether it be external or internal. You really need to shape and drive that strategy so that the conversation isn't happening while you're sitting on the sidelines. We've pulled some data from a couple of different sources through Indeed and Glassdoor to understand why it's important to candidates that employers really build out and activate on an employer branding strategy. So a few stats here. Job seekers who saw a company's brand 10 plus times were 8 times more likely to apply than those who saw it once. So touching the candidate at every stage in their journey, whether it be on job boards or consumer sites, you want to develop that frequency of brand impressions with the candidates to ultimately stay top of mind and stay relevant. I think there's a lot of conversations, again, that happen while organizations are sitting on the sidelines. But if you're driving that message, the candidate is really receiving what you are putting out there. And to build on that, 75% of active job seekers are more likely to apply to a job if an employer is actively managing and promoting their employer brand, So again, it's building off of the engagement rate, but then the conversion rate. So when a candidate is actually ready to make a move, employers who are actively managing their brand are going to see that higher conversion rate, higher volume of apply, and ultimately better quality. Again, kind of going off of that, companies who invest in employer branding saw a 34% increase in apply starts, according to Indeed and Glassdoor. So it just underlines the fact that this is an area that candidates nowadays really expect employers and organizations to invest in. Outside of just the impact that employer branding can have on the candidate, there's business impact as well in terms of increasing your ability to attract more candidates, getting new hires to commit by 29%, and reducing overall turnover by 69%. So where it might seem like a nice to have from an employer branding perspective, it's really important from a business standpoint that companies are investing up front in building out that strategy so that they're saving money in the long run and also building a more cohesive and committed employee base. I think what we've seen over the years is when companies are committed to the people, it really resonates in an authentic way to the external job seekers and potential candidates that are looking at their brand from a consumer perspective, but also from an employer perspective. So I think it's one of those areas that, again, not only important to focus on the candidate side, but also to understand what that business impact is and tailoring it back and driving those results for the bottom line of your organization. All right. And getting into a little bit of the foundations of employer branding, we have kind of all of these building blocks that kind of make up the overall employer brand strategy for your organization. I think it's a little deceiving in that this graphic is linear because it's not always a linear process. In a perfect world, yes, we would love it if organizations could build out and define and understand an EVP, build those creative assets to showcase that employer brand, create a streamlined candidate experience, whether it be through a CRM or through an ATS, career site. All of those components are extremely valuable and important. But I think something to note and something that's really important to recognize is that you don't have to have all of that completely perfected before you're able to activate your employer brand. I think what we've found just with clients and over the years is that when we're able to run campaigns and push messaging out into the marketplace, we're able to iterate and learn and get real-time feedback from potential candidates and build that into our overall strategy. So not only understanding all of those important building blocks, but also just knowing that things are going to change over time. If you build out a brand strategy and EVP now, maybe in 5-10 years, that's no longer relevant. I think there's ways to iterate and optimize how we're presenting our employer brand and how you go about activating that brand in the marketplace. A lot of words on a slide. So I think, as many of you, I'm sure, have had experience with building or being a part of building out an EVP strategy, there's really impactful foundations that go into what that looks like. And again, as we're building out an overall effective employer branding strategy, you want to have this purpose-driven idea and statement to really articulate what it's like to work at your organization. Why would a candidate choose to work for you versus a competitor right down the road? It's really the promise that an organization makes to the candidate and existing employees as well. I think in terms of the consumer value proposition, it's very similar. You want to understand why you should buy that pair of shoes. What's the benefit? Is it more comfortable? Do they last longer? Is there a really great warranty with that product? So I think that's something that you want to understand, what those key components are as it relates to your organization and what you're offering to potential candidates. As part of that, it's critical to recognize that it's not always what you think your EVP statement is. It's really based on research and hard data to define what that employee value proposition is. What we see as our team runs EVP development projects for clients is that sometimes what executives think are the most important components of their EVP are really not what the folks internally or externally view as the value to work at your organization. So I think it's important, as you're thinking about building out an EVP statement, to recognize that it's not always going to be what you think. It may be something that surprises you along the way. And I think just as you're building out an EVP, leveraging that in the marketplace to create those brand assets and activate your strategy from a messaging standpoint, and make sure that that's consistent along the way. I love this image. This is an example of an EVP project that we did for an agricultural client. I used to work on a farm growing up, actually, in the summertime. So this really brings me back to my roots. And it seems a little bit hokey, but there's core foundational reasoning behind every single word selected as part of this EVP statement from research that was conducted internally and externally, to understand the consumer brand, conducting interviews, focus groups. All of that data goes into building out this beautiful externally facing imagery that in messaging that candidates are viewing when they're interacting with your brand. To kind of highlight that piece, there's a lot of words on this slide, but I think the most important takeaway here is that there is an anatomy behind an EVP statement. It's not just words thrown out there for people to consume. It's really these words that are selected and intentionally chosen are built with purpose. You can see communities. It's not just communities. Communities to the reader or user means coworkers, teams, farmers, towns where you operate, making it relatable to anyone who might read this statement. Forward is pushing kind of the direction of the future, implying that there's constant movement and change within this industry. We're not stagnant. So it's really the essence behind your organization, and trying to craft that in a meaningful, authentic way is really important as you're trying to understand the strategy that you're bringing to market and the messaging that you want to deliver to potential candidates. And again, it's just the first step. So having that EVP statement, those words are all well and good, but if you don't have the imagery to go along with that, people just get lost in the words, in the phrases that you're putting out there. I think especially today, where there's such high competition, there's an extreme need to tailor the imagery that you're tying together with the messaging that you're putting out into the marketplace to inspire candidates to join your company. It's really creating those targeted messages to bring the EVP to life. And I think as it relates to the EVP research and understanding your target personas, that can help craft the strategy moving forward. So for a client, we would typically conduct all the research, build that foundation, and understand who the personas are that make up our employee population. And again, not trying to distill down all of these different facets that make up a target audience for a particular organization, but there's really key components to understanding the messages that matter and resonate with that audience. And how do you take those key components, distill them down, and deliver them to the end user, to the candidate, as they're either looking for your job or are looking for a job with your organization, or are presented with your employer brand where they're spending time online. And I think the data that we've seen from our HireClix candidate experience survey really shows that having that consistency in employer brand messaging is critical when you're activating on these different channels. You can see that these are the kind of main sites that candidates are going to learn about an organization before they decide to apply. So while it's important to ensure that your career site reflects your employer brand, it's really critical to build on that brand and activate it on direct response job boards like Indeed, on social media with LinkedIn, Facebook, making sure you're putting the right messaging out there on Google and being available from a search engine optimization standpoint. Every touch point in the candidate journey is a reflection of your employer brand. And it's just really critical to make it count. And not only is that journey happening externally as candidates are searching and finding your jobs in your organization, carrying that same consistency throughout their experience with your company is only going to continue to build that brand and create that authentic external understanding of what it really is like to work for your company. And kind of the next stage before getting into activating an employer brand in the marketplace is ensuring that you're thinking through where you're going to be sending candidates. So kind of going back to the previous slide, the traffic going back to the career site is important because candidates are going there learning more about your organization. But as it relates to different messages and initiatives, you want to build out those campaign destinations to make sure that the candidate experience is streamlined. So building talent community pages based on specific hiring initiatives or job groups and families, priority locations, all of those things are the assets used to kind of build out the logistics of that employer brand strategy. So not only building the creative and making everything pop from a user experience standpoint, but from an experience standpoint, you want to make sure that you're decreasing the barrier to entry so that you're not experiencing a 40% abandonment rate on job applications. And with employer branding campaigns, we're not always looking at an apply as a key metric necessarily. It's still an important measurement to understand how candidates are flowing through. So while I think there's opportunity for innovation on the front end of the candidate experience, it's really important to pay attention to where you're sending candidates and what that experience looks like. And our team over the years has experienced a lot of different career site technologies that just really have fallen short of delivering on that promise. And our team's actually, the HireClix team is now in the game of building out career sites for our clients because we've seen the opportunity and, well, missed opportunity really, where we're losing candidates when we're activating employer branding or direct response campaigns. All right, so we're gonna get into it now, activating and expanding your employer branding strategy. Something that we've talked about from the very early days at HireClix is the need to go beyond job boards. I mentioned earlier that Neil had focused on leveraging consumer sites to drive candidates back to Monster. It's really a similar process these days, and just as important, if not more important than it was 10 plus years ago, to ensure that you're activating your employer brand on the channels where candidates are spending time. So the graphic over here on the right side just really highlights, I think, while it's critical to make sure that you're advertising on the job boards for active job seekers, consumers are really spending 98% of their time on other channels like Spotify, Facebook, TikTok, whatever it happens to be. They're not spending hours on end scrolling Indeed as much as active candidates are. Passive candidates are really using digital media as more of a consumer than a candidate. But there is an intersection of those groups, and we need to make sure that we're activating our brand to those potential candidates. I think as we've looked at this over the years, and all of you are probably familiar with every single logo that's showing on the screen here, but we've seen that direct response is great. It's really important at this stage to make sure, especially as many of these channels, Indeed, Glassdoor, LinkedIn, offer more employer branding focused products and services with ads, or the employer branding hub with company profiles and all of that, to ensure that you're enhancing and optimizing your presence on those sites, because that's where you're getting activity and engagement from active job seekers. As you move further to the right on this continuum, it's hard to say whether or not you're actually running or being seen on these channels if you're not actively pushing your messaging out there. Facebook, people can find your page, maybe Instagram or TikTok if they search for it. But how are you capturing the attention of those potential candidates where they're spending time? I think something, as we've looked at this continuum over the years and in building out recruitment marketing campaigns for our clients, is that while direct response is really important to make sure that you're driving volume applies, all of that, the employer branding channels or consumer media sites are really where you're going to engage with those candidates in a targeted way. You can really craft that messaging and share that employer brand in a more impactful manner to the end users. And so while the direct response channels are great from a lower cost or lower acquisition standpoint, it's just as important to leverage some of these channels on towards the right, to ensure that you're capturing mind share and creating a competitive advantage. Like with ESPN, for example, wouldn't it be amazing to target your top 5 locations for sales and activate those ads during March Madness? Figuring out for Bethany Builder that she spends a significant amount of time listening to a certain category of podcasts on Spotify, we can drill down into those different channels and understand the target audience to activate within those channels. And I think just as it relates to this, there's Hulu and connected TV is a whole new frontier for employers. And I think just as we're thinking about additional opportunities, there's always going to be iterations that fall into this area that are important for employers and organizations to keep in mind. I think where it's always interesting talking to friends or family about where they saw a crazy ad on Bumble or any channel. There's always those new opportunities to test and push the envelope on the different opportunities where different consumer sites where you can advertise. All right, and executing on an employee strategy. So we wanted to go through kind of an example, but and showcase really how we at HireClix approach activating employer branding online. So as I mentioned, we've been doing this for a long time, but most recently we've launched what we are calling our employer brand network. So really a streamlined way for our clients to activate their employer brand across all of those different channels that make up the recruitment marketing continuum. We look at it from kind of different channel categories as it relates to display channels, video, audio, social, search, and tailoring proposals and campaign strategies for our clients based on their objectives and audiences, budget, and leveraging these various channels to activate their employer brand out in the marketplace. It's typically a mix of these 5 categories. It could be 2 channels in social, maybe TikTok and Facebook, maybe an audio campaign, Google search, but really determining what that mix looks like and pulling the levers on the back end of the campaign to ensure that we're delivering the best return on investment for our clients in an effective way. It's really the purpose, again, going back to how do we go beyond job boards? It's scaling and optimizing your employer brand on trusted media sites with an expert partner. So I think this is just our approach to how we look at consumer advertising as it relates to employer branding and recruitment marketing. With all of these different channels, I think something to keep in mind where with the job boards, again, super beneficial for active job seekers and to ensure that you're getting in front of those candidates when they're ready to apply for a job. With these different sites and categories, we're able to pull the levers on the different ways that we're targeting our potential candidates. So whether it's on location, demographics, behavioral targeting, there's a lot of granularity that we can get to based on whatever that target audience looks like. So if we want to drill down from a local perspective, we can get as granular as a specific pin on a hospital in downtown Boston, or go regional to a specific area or national, whatever that kind of priority location looks like. We can activate and showcase available jobs or career opportunities with an organization at that level, or build in, if we're looking to promote remote jobs, we could still leverage market research from Lightcast as a technology that we have access to pull BLS data and understand what the supply and demand for specific types of candidates is in different areas around the country. So if we're looking for software developers, we could plan to target San Francisco, Raleigh, Boston, whatever that audience is. There's a way to leverage some of that market data to ultimately decide and target those candidates where they're spending time. As we look at demographic targeting, there's opportunity to dig into professional targeting, income, education. There's different risks and opportunities associated with that. You obviously want to be careful as it relates to any employment ads, how you're going about that targeting, but there's a unique opportunity for leveraging some of that capability for diversity campaigns and initiatives. So there's a lot of different levers that we can pull as it relates to advertising and getting in front of different types of candidates who may be interested in jobs or different hobbies, all these different factors. And I think as you look at first and third party data, it's definitely more of a consumer marketing mindset to take to recruitment advertising. But I think we really think that it's going to be a next phase of advertising as cookies start to go by the wayside, leveraging your existing CRM and ATS data to target candidates who may have not completed an apply or maybe were silver medalists as part of a campaign strategy, and going after those candidates to re-engage them with your brand. Just going through quickly a client example. We wanted to showcase one of our clients' brands that we recently ran a campaign for, where They had all of the tools built out, those foundations that we talked about earlier, with building out an EVP, brand guidelines for their employer brand specifically, and the assets to activate in the marketplace. Those were all created, and unfortunately, we're just kind of sitting stagnant. They hadn't leveraged those in terms of pushing that messaging out to potential candidates. And when we started working with this client, we saw that opportunity and put together a recommendation based on their priority needs to use some of these assets to target messaging to key audiences for their sales team. They gave us kind of 2 tiers of priority locations, the specific job titles that they were looking for. And as we pulled in that recommendation, we were able to activate out in the marketplace. Just looking at kind of what that looks like, it's always helpful to see a visual of an active employer brand out in the wild. I think it's interesting with clients where certain clients want to see sample ads of what something looks like. And unless they're that specific target audience, that left-handed software engineer in Boston, you're not going to get served that ad. But it's really impactful to see that branding, that messaging for your organization out in the marketplace. And I think something to note with any employer branding campaign, just like with direct response advertising on Indeed or other programmatic campaigns that we may run on job boards, Google, we want to ensure that we're tracking the engagement with the ads and understanding what the ROI is for those initiatives. So not only looking at the top of funnel metrics, which are typically most, I don't want to say most valuable, but most indicative of a strong employer branding campaign, because you're getting the eyeballs, impressions on an ad, then engaging that candidate when they click on the ad, and then ultimately looking to see what the conversion rate looks like from a lead or apply standpoint. So looking at that full funnel and understanding what those conversion rates and costs look like at each stage of the candidate journey is really important to indicate to our team what messaging is resonating. Do we need to tailor some of the targeting in a different way or expand because we're not seeing engagement on certain channels? Maybe we need to diversify to audio or to video channels and leverage those assets to engage with this audience. So I think all of these metrics are really important to measure as you're evaluating the impact of your employer branding campaigns. And for this particular client, really strong performance that we saw from the campaign flight, which was from September through January, September 2023 to January 2024. We saw 20 million employer branding impressions. So candidates seeing those ads on various consumer sites, to 18,000 career site visits for a cost of $12 to $25 cost per 1,000 impression, which is really an indication to us for the competitiveness and the premium that may be placed on certain channels. Video is more expensive from a cost per 1,000 impression standpoint because you don't necessarily have as much inventory or as potentially as much audience on that channel versus a display ad where we can target a whole list of different consumer sites like Forbes, ESPN, weather.com, and serve those ads to users in a more cost-effective manner. So depending on the channel where we're activating, that CPM is going to range from kind of a lower cost to a more premium cost with those higher channels. And just showcasing over time, kind of going back to that diversification and flexibility with campaigns. I think where you need to be actively managing an employer branding campaign when you're pushing ads into the marketplace is looking at the fluctuation of engagement rate and also cost associated with those different channels. So for this particular client, we saw that there was an opportunity to layer on audio, social as part of the mix in a more strategic way so that we could drive up that engagement and ultimately drive down the cost in various ways. I think, again, going back to the thought that it doesn't always have to be a linear process to have every brand asset available at the onset of a campaign. Over the flight of a campaign, you can layer on these different tactics and kind of work with corporate marketing or your recruitment marketing agency to build out the necessary creative assets for those different channels. And I think this is just kind of going back to showcasing what the impact is of those employer branding campaigns. So looking at traffic, career site traffic from January 23 to January 24, a huge uptick in new users and sessions overall. But I think what's impactful is not only that level of engagement on the career site and activation of their employer brand, but ultimately what they were able to do from a new user standpoint. So candidates who may not have been aware of their brand at all are now being driven back to the site. And we know that they're the right people because we're targeting them and not just sitting back waiting for those right candidates to come to us. Awesome. And I want to leave some time for questions, but before we go into Q&A, just a few things to keep in mind that we've talked through, but I think are really important to keep top of mind as you're building out your employer branding strategy for success in 2024 and beyond is to be authentic. I think with all of the opportunity for candidates to rate and review your organization, whether it's candidates, existing employees, or past employees, you want to make sure that you're aligning that messaging in the marketplace with how your brand is perceived. I think there's a balance of that perceived promise versus what you're actually delivering to candidates. So it's really crucial to be authentic with the message that you're putting out to potential candidates. I think starting simple, going back to it's not always a linear process. There's going to be need to activate on certain campaigns now and certain initiatives now for your employer brand strategy. As you can build out that full-blown EVP in parallel and work those over time, it's extremely valuable to have all those foundations in place, but you want to make sure that you're not waiting for that to activate your employer brand in the marketplace because you're already behind if you're not out there. You're becoming irrelevant if you're not being proactive and getting in front of candidates in an impactful way. And I think just continuing to evolve and iterate is extremely important. Being open to new channels, new creative is going to continue to be a big area of focus as we move into the rest of this year and beyond. And just know that there's always help out there. Little HireClix plug here. We help with all of these different areas. And I think we are the folks that solve problems. As I mentioned, when our customers succeed, we succeed. So if you're kind of stuck in any stage of the process of developing that strategy or activating ads or building a career site that enhances that candidate experience, we'd love to talk and see how we can help. Awesome. All right. We have some questions.
All right, Cori, you ready?
Yeah.
We've got a few questions that are coming in. Okay. Any idea what I should do to activate my employer brand in an area where we are opening a new warehouse?
Yes. So in terms of moving to a new or launching a new location for your company, I think it's always a great start to engage with the local audience. So whether that be with kind of offline marketing, we've done that a lot with different clients when they're opening a new store or new distribution center. If your brand isn't known in that area, those offline tactics can often help drive that overall awareness for your brand. I think kind of working those offline strategies in conjunction with the direct response and more awareness focused campaigns on consumer sites is really a great way to build out a 2-tier strategy as you do
that. Very cool. Good answer, Cori. Someone actually just asked a follow-up to that. What is an offline tactic or strategy that you might use, just as an example?
That's a great question. So what we've done with many clients, it's funny, QR codes have made the biggest comeback of the decade, I think, post-COVID here, but we've activated on billboards or even gas station advertising. We've done electric bike charging stations, ads there. So there's a lot of different opportunities to activate on some of those offline media channels while still capturing as best we can some of the metrics that we're tying to engagement with that. So with QR codes, you can do a customized landing page or customized URL to track users kind of scanning that QR code from some of those offline media channels.
Yeah, I mean, movie theaters, bowling alleys, like you name it. We've done ads that are offline and a little more traditional, and sometimes in some more remote locations. Is often a trigger for doing more offline activity as well. Okay, another one for you. How long should an employer branding campaign run?
It's a great question. So I think a lot of folks look at employer branding when they have high priority needs. So if you're hiring seasonally, standing those campaigns up leading into that busy season. But really, I would say the minimum for running an effective employer branding campaign is 3 months. That typically gives us enough runway to understand how folks are engaging with those ads and the messages that we're putting out into the marketplace and iterate from there. I think it's any less than 3 months, you're really not giving the campaigns and channels enough runway for folks to see your brand enough to ultimately interact and hopefully convert.
Great. And then, what is your favorite advertising channel for employer branding?
That's a great question. I would say so. I mean, there's a lot. I think it really depends on the audience that you're looking to target, to be honest. I've been really impressed and surprised with the engagement we've seen with Reddit over the years. And I think that's a really valuable channel. I think you're looking at targeting the younger generations. TikTok's going to be a really great place to activate your brand. So it depends on the audience you're looking for, but I mean, I would say probably I like Reddit, I guess. We're talking preferences.
All right, cool. And we've got one more here. What if I don't have video ads for YouTube or banner ads for other advertising channels? Where do I start?
It's a good question. So if you don't have those assets available, we always recommend partnering as closely with you as you can with corporate marketing. We typically, when we're kicking off with clients, try to organize collective conversations with TA and corporate marketing to ensure that we're not stepping on toes, that we're aligning everything. But oftentimes, corporate marketing is pulled in the direction of consumer ads or assets that they need to build out for the business. So it can definitely be challenging to get the attention that you need to activate those assets or get those assets even created. I would say it's great to work with a partner like HireClix on building out those assets. It's the creative in TA is a little bit behind the times in some areas. And I feel like if you're partnering with an innovative creative agency to help streamline that process, it can make your life a lot easier and enable you to quickly activate some of those channels that you might not have the ability to right now because you don't have those assets.
Makes sense. I actually did get one more. Sorry, I thought that was going to be the last one. But what if I really need to get applicants? Should I do employer branding?
Yes, absolutely. So in my opinion, it's not a one or the other. I think you really need to work both in conjunction. So that whole continuum that we talked through earlier on, it's not only skewing towards direct response and only skewing towards employer branding. It's finding a mix and complement of those different channels to accomplish your business objectives. So while you're looking for, even with clients when we're building out proposals for a priority position or location, we're not only looking at those direct response channels like Indeed, Glassdoor, ZipRecruiter. We're layering on channels like Google AdWords, Spotify to ensure that you're staying top of mind because candidates aren't always on those direct response job boards. So it's important to strike a balance between employer branding and direct response ads.
Excellent. Very good. Well, that's all we have for questions. Thank you so much, Cori. Great job today on the webinar. And thank you so much, everyone, for attending.